Let's exchange daughters. I deserve the white girl. Okay, recently it was Mother's Day, and I was talking to Mom on Skype to wish her a happy day and celebrate with her. When we talk about this again, I must clarify English is not my first language. More than 20 years ago, my mother had just joined my father and his family. She was a very hardworking person. She studied and worked, in addition to helping my father's family every time she could, since she did not have family. Everyone loved her for these qualities. At the same time, my uncle had married a woman. Let's call her Liz. Like my mother, Liz had grown up in a poor and toxic family, but she was not at all as hardworking and kind as my mother, nor so beautiful. Liz always envied my mother. She may have been married to a rich man, and I had a better economic position than my mother, but for Liz, it was not enough. She wanted to be admired and loved just like my mother, so she always competed with her, although Mom did not know that she was competing until she left the family. Liz always tried to steal credit from my mother or make my father look bad to the other members of the family, and when she did not succeed, she would cry like a little girl so that someone would take her side. One day, my mother announced to the family that she was pregnant. Everyone celebrated, and this angered Liz. A couple of months later, she announced that she was also pregnant. Clearly, she was competing with my mother again. Over time, it became known that Liz and my mother were going to have girls, and they were very excited. Liz always talked to everyone about how her daughter would be, saying that her girl would have the white skin of her father, the green eyes of she, and brown hair. I do not know where the brown hair would come from, but, well, my mother only hoped that I was born in good health. My mother never stopped working even while pregnant, while Liz stayed home 9 months pregnant without doing anything. The first to be born was me. I was born healthy. Liz did not even hold me when I was introduced to the family. She was still talking about her daughter. A few months later, my cousin was born, and it was here when Liz's pride went to the bottom. Her daughter was born very similar to her, with dark skin and straight hair, and the brown eyes of her father. Nothing like the white girl with brown hair and green eyes that she wanted. Even so, my cousin was beautiful. When my mother arrived at Liz's house, she left me with my cousin in the crib, and while she had coffee with my aunt and Liz, she noticed how she paid me a lot of attention. She always approached the crib and tried to play with me, ignoring her own daughter. I was born identical to my mother, with very light skin, black hair, and small pink mouth, and big brown eyes. Liz always complimented my skin and eyes, to which my mother was grateful. She always tried to outshine me, which my mother did not see with favor, since she neglected my cousin, and attending to me was my mom's job. One day, Liz approached the crib to see me. She asked my mother if she wanted to change her daughters. Mom knew she was not joking. Even so, I tried to make it look like a joke. Liz insisted, and my mother let her smile. The conversation went something like this. It shows that you like my daughter very much, and I like yours. If we exchange them, we'll be happier. I have a good economic position, and I will be able to give her everything she needs. What she needs is her mother. You give your daughter what she needs, and I will give mine the same, but only my true daughter. I do not intend to give it to you. Your daughter does not seem like your daughter. She adapts more to our family. She has a more delicate appearance that will fit with our way of life. Do you plan to deprive her of that? Mine, on the contrary, adapts more to your lifestyle. It will not be difficult to work. Do you know how racist and stupid you sound? I'm not a racist. I'm only telling the truth. I need this girl. Besides, there will be no difference. They are almost the same age, and I doubt that the family cares. I need this girl for the simple fact of being mine. She's my daughter. I gave birth to her. You plan to deprive that girl of a comfortable and happy life just because of your selfishness? What kind of mother are you? Anyone would be happy to exchange children with me. My mother, already angry about this, ended up screaming at her. A better mother than you, because I fight for my daughter, and I do not treat her as an object as you do now. I will give my daughter everything she needs, and you will fill your daughter with happy life that you presume. But do not try to treat the girls as objects. Attend to your daughter, and I'm going to with my child. And don't even think about throwing a tantrum over this. My mother and I left that house, and for a long time she did not let Liz see or visit me, nor did she let them leave me alone with her for fear that Liz would steal from me. Liz believed that she deserved a white daughter because according to her, she adjusted more to her status. Yes, as racist and stupid as it sounds, and that my mother was selfish for not wanting to exchange. Since then, Liz tried to make life impossible for my mother, bothering her at work and inventing accidents, and even slander to blame her. She had also stolen some photos of me and presented me as her daughter to her acquaintances and friends, some that would soon know it was a lie when they visited Liz's house. Liz did not mistreat her daughter, but she always yearned to exchange babies. This continued until my uncle and Liz divorced a few years later. She left the country and rarely contacted her daughter. Shortly after the divorce, the kind of person Liz was known, and of course, my mother also told about the exchange of daughters. Now, Liz is a black stain in our family and is hated even by her own daughter. No one has ever told my cousin about the exchange that her mother wanted to do. P.S. Despite all this, my cousin and I grew up as sisters and we get along great. I'm very happy to have the mother I have and that this exchange would never have happened. Having a mother like that is really disgusting and I'm very sorry for my cousin. First of all, your mother truly seems like an incredible woman. The way she stuck up for both of you and your cousin and put Liz in her place is inspiring. I feel really sorry for your cousin. I hate that people like Liz exist. How can you judge your own daughter by the genes that you gave her? Then proceed to try to trade her around like she's some sort of object. It's disgusting. I think it's great that you have managed to maintain a good relationship with your cousin now. My kid did nothing wrong by pulling your hijab off. This happened to a good friend of mine back in middle school. We will call my friend Habiti, feminine form of the Arabic word for sweetie, because she's such a sweet girl. Entitled jerk will be jerk. And of course, the entitled mom will be Karen, per tradition. In the 8th grade, Habibti decided to wear a hijab, at a school in which she was now the only hijabi. This drew attention. Some people were so nice about it, and told her how lovely and pretty her hijabs looked on her, but others were nasty and Islamophobic. Habibti took everything in stride and treated everyone with kindness regardless. For me, the 8th grade was the year of the 2008 election. American history was a social studies course for 8th grade, so a lot of election was discussed in class. Habibti and I were both in the honors class, and unfortunately, so was Jerk. Jerk was very outspoken in class, and I must say his commitment to his political cause was admirable, in ways, even though his views were polar opposite to mine. One view in particular was his anti-Muslim stance. He would make despicable comments such as all Muslims are terrorists and other predictably Islamophobic rhetoric, and he would always stare daggers at Habibti when he made those comments. I don't think he even knew Habibti was a Muslim until she put on hijab. Once she did, he targeted her a lot. He would ask her if she was hiding a bomb in her hijab. He would cup his hands around his mouth and go, "Jihad!" when she walked into class. On the anniversary of 9/11, he was talking about how Habibti was going to celebrate it. I remember him saying, "You love bin Laden," and things of that nature. During lunch, Habibti was allowed to be excused to pray Zur. Jerk would mock her for it. Habibti never took it to heart. She never even harbored resentment. She treated Jerk with the same kindness she showed to everyone else. One day, Jerk went too far. He wound up walking behind Habibti in the hallway and suddenly pulled her hijab off. Habibti was wearing a hijab cap underneath, and Jerk was not successful at fully pulling the hijab off, since she had it wrapped and pinned well. But the act was unacceptable. Habibti screamed. I was at my locker probably 10 yards away, and while I didn't see it happen, I turned and saw Habibti scrambling to cover and Jerk laughing and running off, making celebratory whoops. Habibti was in tears. I was furious. Habibti went to the office directly and reported what had happened. Jerk was summoned to the office immediately, and his mother was called. She showed up at the school a bit later, and of course, her reaction to her son being in trouble was of the typical entitled mother nature. The principal had explained what had occurred, and that Jerk would be receiving a suspension because his actions were discriminatory and hateful, which was not tolerated in the slightest. I was obviously not present for the conversation, so I'm not going to make something up, but I remember the main points of it. Karen was furious that her son was in trouble and was yelling viciously at the principal. She defended her son's actions. She cited freedom of speech, which is one of the most infuriatingly ridiculous things I've personally ever heard. She even went as far as saying that her son was the person experiencing discrimination since he was a conservative and bitterly spat about the school having a liberal bias. She was threatening to tell the newspapers that her son was being punished for doing nothing wrong and blah blah blah. The principal gave Habibti a chance to tell her account of what was done to her by Jerk throughout the year. She even tried to explain why hijab was important to her and how it would be like someone pulling down Jerk's pants. How would he like it? Both Jerk and his mom were glaring at her the whole time. Jerk called himself a hero and said he was fighting terrorism. Karen said something to the effect of, "You should be thanking him for standing up for America." Of course, the principal was having none of it, and the punishment was firm. And if he was found harassing Habibti again, he would face expulsion. This put Jerk and Karen over the edge, and both of them started verbally attacking Habibti with slurs and telling her to go back to Afghanistan and live in a cave with your leader, referring to bin Laden. The principal had had enough. He told Karen to leave at once, and he was calling the authorities to report her for hate and for harassing a minor. After that, Jerk backed down a little, but still made comments. Habibti has proudly worn hijab ever since, and has always exemplified what a true Muslim is. She has done more charity work and service to the community than anyone I know and graduated from a top university and is now a medical student with hopes to do medical mission work abroad. It's crazy to think that this happened in your school. It's great that you stood up for your friend and defended her when no one else would. I'm sorry that she had to experience something like this at such a young age, but I'm glad that she has friends like you who are willing to stand up for what you believe in. It sounds like the teacher was very supportive of your friend, which is awesome, and it sounds like she took action to help make sure the other students didn't bother her again. Thank you for sharing this story with us. Am I the jerk for telling my daughter she cannot introduce her African-American boyfriend to her grandparents? Let me just preface this by saying this. I have absolutely no problem with interracial relationships. Now that the air is clear, let me continue. My daughter, Anna, has recently started to date an African-American man, Jamal. While I'm not exactly what you would refer to as liberal, he's a nice young man, and as long as my daughter is happy, I'm happy. The problem is, Anna is rather naive about the community she lives in. While her friends are quite content to see a relationship like hers, more than a few tongues are wagging in the community, and a few people have privately expressed their concern to me. As I said, I have no problem with mixed relationships, and I've set them straight, but I'm painfully aware of how these matters are viewed by certain segments of the population. My parents are planning to come and stay with us for a week, and Anna expressed a desire to introduce Jamal to them now that things were getting more serious between them. I told her in no uncertain terms that this wasn't going to happen. I may have no problem with Jamal, but they absolutely will. And even when the relationship ends, they won't forget it. They might even go as far as to cut her off entirely. Anna was extremely upset by this and implied I was a racist and more concerned with what my parents think than how she feels. As I said, I know my parents. They simply aren't okay with mixed relationships, and if Anna were to bring Jamal over, even as a friend, they would be furious both at her and me. Anna is currently staying with Jamal and doesn't want to speak with me right now. My wife stands by me given she knows very well how my parents are. They had a problem with her for months over the length of the skirt she wore when I introduced her to them, for Christ's sake. But a close friend I confided in told me I had behaved like an ass and that I needed to focus more on my daughter than pleasing my parents. No advice needed, but I had to know. Have I been a jerk? I have no idea what to say. I don't think you've been a jerk, but it's hard to say for sure. I know your parents would probably be mad at you if Anna brought Jamal over, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't. If they are willing to cut her off over something like this, then she shouldn't want to involve them in her life. As for your friend telling you that you should focus more on your daughter than pleasing your parents, well, there's no question about it. He's a great friend giving you good advice. I understand your parents are always going to be your parents, and you need to respect them and listen to them. But in this situation, your daughter has to come first. My racist stepmother thinks she's 100% English. I have an entitled and outright abusive stepmother, a 61-year-old female who actually believes she's 100% English. I wish I were joking, but she's the classist racist village Karen who drinks too much pink gin, gets her hair dyed constantly to hide the gray hair coming in, and absolutely has to know all the gossip and everyone's business, to the point she constantly asked me what's come in the mail for me and invaded my room on the regular. Her voice is the god-awful English Northwest country twang. If you know, you know. She's particularly nasty to me, having gaslit, manipulated, and at one point instigated a suicide attempt as well as gotten me kicked out for a week, all for getting an undercut like I've always wanted. For the last bit, the rest is just normal for her. My dad is barely any better, and is a raging sexist, racist, and has severe anger management issues that culminate in me most often being the victim. He used to scream at 9-year-old me for being bad at math, thinking it would make me do better. To this day, he still thinks it was a good idea. Spoiler alert, it wasn't, because I had undiagnosed ADHD, which, surprise, surprise, is somewhat common, from my research at least, in families that have autism in their genetics. My younger brother and other connected relatives have this, quite severely. To the point though, because my dad is a racist, she also shares her openly racist ideals. For instance, they both hate black people and constantly use the one word white people should never say. They criticize the government saying immigrants shouldn't be allowed into the country. Constantly shit on the very restaurants they buy their beloved Indian/Chinese takeout from. Seriously, if you hate them so much, why claim you love the food so much? Absolutely despise anyone that isn't the same race as them. So, you can imagine my mistake by implying that somewhere down the line, some of their family probably wasn't English, because the UK is made up of a lot of people who sailed over to settle throughout history. The absolute outrage on her face. It was only matched by the indignant, no, because I'm 100% English. There aren't any foreigners in my family. Sure, buddy. Sure. I tell her to shut up whenever possible about this, or call her out about any racist nonsense, and because of this, she thinks I have an attitude. News just in, guys. Being an advocate for Black Lives Matter, I attended many a protest because it's the right thing to do, and decent treatment of fellow human beings mean I have an attitude. There is a positive to all this, though, and I didn't want to post my experiences until I had one because I'm a firm believer in positivity breeding more of it. I attended a fine art university in the UK for 3 years and chose to live in the dorms as much as possible. I went no contact as much as I was able, and while some Christmases were absolutely awful being completely alone while I knew my family was feasting, I got to do it as my own identity. I came out to my dad about being non-binary over the phone. He accepted it, but barely. Cut and dyed my hair white as I always wanted. He specifically said I could do that when I wasn't under his roof. Marked that off as a mini malicious compliance. I got to attend a pride parade for the first time and gain new friends. Found out I actually do love pink. I just hate it when it's forced on me in too tight shirts with tacky slogans. And for the grand finale, as of the 17th of June 2022, I got notice that I can graduate and my application to move into a flat with my best friend has been approved. Now, 25-year-old me, despite having lived for 3 years away from home, I never felt free until this very moment. I don't have to go home anymore, ever again. No more abuse or walking on eggshells, worrying that even the slightest noise will set my parents off into an argument. I have barely any belongings besides my PC and some clothes. A couple things to help with dorm life, and I'm poor as heck, but you know, I'll take that any day over being a punching bag to my parents. Wow, your parents sound like complete jerks. Massive respect to you for not falling into their beliefs, as it is very easy for kids to be manipulated by their parents at a young age. You're very brave for standing up to your parents and cutting contact with them. It's clear they never really loved you, or else they wouldn't have treated you like that. You're a good person, and I wish you all the best in life. I hope things get better for you in the future. Am I the jerk for using my mom's religion against her after insulting my son's hair? I was raised Mormon, but I'm not now, nor do I follow any other religion. My mom is still very much in the cult. As such, she has the typical Mormon mindset regarding gender roles and all that nonsense. Granted, I still think she'd be this way without her religion, though maybe not as bad. We get along splendidly, except when the topic of her religion comes up, which doesn't often. She's visiting right now. I don't see her in person much, but she came down for my birthday. It's also important to note that I have 2 sons. My 5-year-old has a mohawk. My 3-year-old has shaggy shoulder-length hair. He's never had a haircut for a multitude of reasons, none of which would even be asked if he were a girl. Not long after she got here, she started going in on his hair. This is not the first time she's given her opinion on it. Why don't I cut it? Don't I want to prevent him from being bullied? Or from people thinking he's a girl? Because he hasn't asked, and I want it to be his choice. Because he acts like I'm murdering him when I brush his teeth and hair. Because he also flails around like he's having an exorcism, so imagine that with a pair of scissors. Because if someone sees long hair and assumes girl, that's on them, and a simple he's a boy corrects it. But mostly, it's because I don't fucking want to. She got pissed and said what she really thought, which was, well, I just don't like long hair on boys. Clearly. Yet, she has no problem with my other son's mohawk. Guess that's boyish enough for her. And she said it in front of both my sons, which pisses me off. I said the first thing which came to my head, which was, if you have a problem with long hair on boys, I suggest you take it up with your Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. You can start by asking him to get a haircut. Call John the barber. Bro, if looks could kill, I'd be in outer darkness right now. She steeped in her anger for a while, but didn't say anything else. She hasn't changed her opinion, nor will she, but I don't think she wants to get roasted again either, so she won't bring it up anymore. I feel like we're both jerks. As much as I hate her religion, that was also a low blow, and I have a tendency to speak first, regret later. Though I don't necessarily regret my words, I do regret how they made her feel. She is my mom after all. I'm sorry your mom is such a jerk. I know she's your mom, but she sounds like a real piece of work. I hope you can forgive her and move on. As for the haircut, you're right. If he doesn't want to get one, that's his choice. You don't have to justify it to anyone, especially not your mom. And she has no right to try and guilt trip you into getting him a haircut. It's his hair. The end. Karen yells at white girl for speaking a Native American language. For some background, I'm Native American. My mom is from a Plateau tribe and my dad is Plains tribe. I grew up learning both languages. Since my best friend was always at my house and also grew up on the reservation, she was surrounded by the language and culture. Now, my best friend, who I'll call Mandy, is white. By the time we both left high school, Mandy could speak both my tribal languages as well as any tribal member. I have this habit whenever I get excited or emotional, I speak one of my tribal languages. This is a habit that Mandy picked up as well. Now, the story happens in a department store that sells food and other goods. I had to grab something in electronics, and Mandy went to the grocery section to stock up on junk food. She was reaching for some chips when multiple bags fell and she yelled in a Native American language. A woman, I'll call Karen, overhears and walks up to Mandy and starts lecturing her about speaking gibberish and setting a bad example for children that could be nearby. Mandy explained that she was speaking a Native American language of a local tribe. This set the woman off even more. Karen started going off on how it was wrong for Mandy being white and speaking that language. Karen said Mandy was racist and to stop pretending and whatnot. I happened to come in at the tail end and asked what the problem was. Karen saw I was Native American and told me I should stay away from that racist trash. I started to get very upset about that but tried to remain calm. I just said, "Miss, this is my best friend, and though we don't share blood, she is my family. She grew up on the reservation with me, so of course she knows our culture and language. How is her learning my culture and language any different than people who learn Spanish or French? Furthermore, military families that live overseas pick up a second language." I don't know if Karen understood anything I was saying because her face didn't change. She just turned and walked away. I'm sorry that happened to you. What a jerk. How awful for her to come up and start yelling at you for speaking your native language. I will never understand how this is an issue to someone else. Everyone just needs to focus on themselves and stop getting into other people's business. It's admiring the way you stuck up for your friend instantly. You two seem to have a great bond. If you enjoyed these stories, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell. Check out the other videos on your screen right now. Otherwise, you're definitely the jerk.